Most people believe turbulence is just random air, and where you sit doesn't matter. But the brutal truth is, one simple seat click can decide whether your next flight feels like a roller coaster or a gentle ride. For decades, passengers in certain rows have endured far harsher jolts and even experienced more injuries, all from unknowingly picking the wrong spot. But why do some seats turn mild turbulence into chaos while others barely feel a bump? The real answer is hidden in the design of every passenger jet, and once you know it, you'll never see seat maps the same way again. So, which part of the plane transforms turbulence into trouble? The science is simpler and more surprising than you think. Every airplane, no matter how big or small, relies on a single invisible balance point to stay steady in flight. Pilots call this the center of gravity, and it sits close to the front of the wings. Think of it as the aircraft's natural seesaw pivot. When the plane hits a pocket of rough air, the center of gravity acts like the anchor point. The aircraft rocks around this spot, not from the nose or tail, but from right near the wings. A veteran captain once described it like this: if you want a smoother ride, aim for the middle. That's because the middle rows are closest to the center of gravity, where the plane's weight balances perfectly. The farther you are from this spot, the more you'll feel every jolt. Picture a playground seesaw. Sit near the center, and the up and down motion feels gentle. Move toward the end, and each bump gets magnified. Aircraft designers place the center of gravity near the front of the wings on purpose. It keeps the plane controllable, even when the wind gets choppy. When turbulence strikes, the plane doesn't just bounce up and down. The whole body rotates slightly around this balance point. That's why seats over the wings, or just ahead of them, feel noticeably calmer. The wings themselves act like giant shock absorbers, soaking up some of the motion before it reaches your seat. So, while turbulence might feel random, the science behind it is simple. The closer you are to the plane's balance point, the less those bumps will throw you around. That's the secret behind those mid-cabin seats that always seem a little steadier, even when the air outside isn't. An aerospace engineer once compared the airplane cabin to a giant ruler balanced on your finger. The balance point is close to the wings, but the real surprise comes when you look at how motion travels along that ruler. If you tap it in the middle, the ends swing much farther than the spot above your finger. The same thing happens in the air. When turbulence rocks the plane, every seat pivots around that invisible balance point. But the farther you are from it, toward the nose, or especially the tail, the bigger the arc your seat traces with every jolt. Think about the tail section. A small angle at the center means a huge swing at the back. That's why passengers sitting near the rear often feel like they're on a carnival ride, even when the movement up front is barely noticeable. Engineers call this the lever arm effect. The seat map might look like a simple row of numbers, but in reality, each seat's distance from the center of gravity acts like a multiplier for motion. A seat just a few meters farther from the midpoint can double or triple the vertical movement you feel in rough air. Some aircraft are longer than others, making the tail even more sensitive to these swings. On a typical jet, the very last row can experience up to twice the vertical acceleration as seats over the wings during the same patch of turbulence. That's not just a matter of comfort, it's basic physics. The next time you're picking a seat, imagine that ruler and remember, a few rows forward can make all the difference between a gentle rock and a wild swing. On a typical seat map, the difference between a smooth ride and a rough one is easier to spot than most people think. The calmest seats line up right over the wings, usually marked in green on turbulence charts. That's the spot closest to the plane's center of gravity, where the aircraft pivots and absorbs most of the shaking before it ever reaches you. Move a few rows forward or backward, and the color shifts to amber. These seats are still manageable, but you'll notice more sway and bounce, especially in patchy air. Now, look at the tail section, often highlighted in red. This is where motion gets magnified. The very last rows, tucked near the rear galley and lavatories, can double the vertical movement you feel compared to the middle. Pilots sometimes warn crew about the tail swing, and flight attendants know these seats best for sudden jolts. The back isn't just noisier, it's the hotspot for turbulence. If you want the steadiest ride, skip the rear and aim for seats just above or slightly ahead of the wings. On most jets, that's about rows 10 to 25. A single seat click here can mean the difference between a gentle rock and a roller coaster drop. Aircraft size matters more than most people realize when it comes to turbulence. Wide-body jets like the Boeing 777 or Airbus A350 handle rough air differently than narrow-body planes, such as the 737 or A320. The main reason is wing loading, the weight each square meter of wing has to carry. On a 787 Dreamliner, for example, the wing loading is about 670 kilograms per square meter, which is 60% higher than what you'll find on a small regional jet. That extra mass means the plane doesn't get tossed around as easily. Engineers compare it to a heavy truck driving over potholes. The bigger the vehicle, the less you feel each bump. Flight test data backs this up. Wide-body jets experience fewer and smaller jolts from the same patch of turbulence. For example, narrow-body planes encounter turbulence-induced accelerations up to twice as often as wide bodies, and the jolts can be 0.1 g stronger. The difference is even bigger during sharp maneuvers or sudden gusts. Modern wide bodies also have flexible wings and smart control systems that actively counteract bumps, sometimes cutting the motion passengers feel by half. But size isn't the only factor. Timing plays a huge role too. Meteorologists who track turbulence for airlines will tell you that morning flights are usually smoother, especially at lower altitudes. That's because the sun hasn't had time to heat the ground and stir up thermal currents. A study using 25 million aircraft weather reports found that flights departing at dawn hit about 30% less turbulence than those in the afternoon. In the summer, this gap gets even wider. So, if you're booking a ticket and want the calmest ride, look for a wide-body jet and aim for the earliest flight of the day. It's a simple adjustment that can make a world of difference, especially if you're sensitive to motion or just want a more peaceful journey. Seat selection is one of the few parts of flying you can actually control, but the booking process has a few traps that can cost you comfort, money, or both. The first rule: never let the airline auto-assign your seat if you care about where you sit. Automatic assignments often land you in the very back or in leftover seats that nobody else wanted. Instead, always click through to the seat map. Don't just accept the default. When you're choosing, pay close attention to the map's details. Most airline seat maps aren't drawn to scale, so a seat that looks like it's over the wing might actually be several rows in front or behind. Cross-check with a site like Seat Guru or Aerolopa, which shows the real aircraft layout and highlights the wing zone. Exit rows almost always mark the start of the wing area, so use them as a reference point. Don't rely on just one app or website. Airline apps sometimes block out seats that are still available through third-party tools, and vice versa. Compare both to find the best options. If you're booking for a group, select seats together as early as possible. Airlines often split up families or friends if you wait too long. And if you're flying a wide body, look for the mid-cabin sections, which are generally quieter and steadier. For narrow bodies, aim for rows just ahead of the wing, since those fill up quickly. The key is to act fast and double-check the details before you click confirm. That single choice can make the difference between a smooth, comfortable flight and a bumpy ride you'll want to forget. Motion sickness can hit anyone, But there are a few tricks that make a big difference. If you're prone to nausea, the best spot is a window seat over the wing. That's where the ride is smoothest, and looking out at the horizon helps your brain sync up with the motion. Avoid reading or staring at screens during bumpy stretches. Your inner ear and your eyes need to agree on what's moving. Cabin crew always recommend turning on the overhead air vent and aiming it at your face. Cool air helps settle your stomach and keeps your head clear, especially when the cabin gets stuffy. Hydration matters more than most people think. Drink water regularly, skip the alcohol, and go easy on caffeine. If you're feeling queasy, small sips and a few deep breaths can help more than you'd expect. No matter where you're sitting, keep your seatbelt fastened whenever you're in your seat. Turbulence can arrive without warning, and nearly every serious injury happens when someone isn't buckled up. The numbers back this up. Almost 80% of turbulence injuries involve people who are out of their seats or had their belts unfastened. Even on smooth flights, staying buckled means you're prepared for the unexpected. That simple click is your best defense against surprise bumps every time. In 2023, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board reported that over 80% of serious turbulence injuries happened to passengers not wearing seatbelts. This documentary revealed why. Seats furthest from the plane's center of gravity, usually at the tail, amplify every jolt, while rows over the wings remain noticeably steadier. Engineers, pilots, and meteorologists agree. Wide-body jets and early morning flights statistically encounter less turbulence, but no seat is immune. Despite decades of research, turbulence prediction remains imprecise, and airlines rarely disclose detailed cabin motion data to the public. Still, the evidence is clear. Seat location, aircraft size, and timing all play measurable roles in your comfort and safety. Booking with knowledge, choosing mid-cabin seats, checking aircraft type, and wearing your seatbelt can reduce risk. The lesson is simple but proven. One seat click, grounded in physics, can shape your flight experience more than most travelers realize.